I'll give each speaker like 2 minutes to just introduce themselves and their work, and then we'll open some dialogue. I've got some questions, but we'll open some dialogue to the public to just try and get to know you a little bit more. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right then, who wants to go first? I'll go to Shannon.
Okay, just testing. Can people hear that?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
You can take the mic off if you want to.
I don't know, that feels very, yeah.
Do it.
Hi everyone. So my name is Shannon Jackson. I think before I just in any way introduce myself and pass on to some of the amazing people that are also speaking today, I just want to say such a thank you to everyone that has spoken before, and in particular, I only saw the 2 presentations before, but my own route into climate activism was actually working with particularly Muslim communities in Nottingham and them highlighting just how essential it is to care for the planet. So it was an absolute privilege to hear from the 2 speakers previously, and I just want to say that I think maybe some of what we'll touch on today might feel a bit distant from a lot of the immediate everyday things that we've heard from today in relation to Islamophobia and racism that exists. I would like to throw out that I hope that with you in the room, we can also make this a conversation which feels immediate and relevant, and that this is all connected, and we don't pretend to have any of the answers. This is something which we organise together and impacts our mental health every day, also recognising that comes with the privilege of not having to deal with racism every day, and not having to deal with Islamophobia every day. So whatever we can do as movements to support that as well and stand in allyship with you, I want to just throw that out there before I introduce myself, because I think that's really essential, just to acknowledge the room. And thank you, David, for inviting us into this space. My name is Shannon. I'm 26. I live in Leeds, in Chapeltown, and I've been organising with the Youth Strike for Climate, which we, in conversation actually with the mosques in the city and other groups, we changed our name a year and a half ago because we recognise that striking from school is not an action which is open to every community and actually puts a lot of communities at risk. So just to acknowledge, we sent the wrong logo, but we no longer strike. So we are a youth group that is very, very scared about the state of our planet and the state and how that impacts communities. For example, kind of the floods in Pakistan right now and the displacements of millions of people. So I've been organising with that group for 3 years, and I work alongside wonderful people like Daisy and Naomi, and I've only just had the privilege of being introduced to Sam. But it's been a journey, and I want to just thank everyone for opening up this space to talk in particular about mental health within that. It's a terrifying time that we live in, but meeting wonderful people and sitting in rooms like this keeps me going personally, so just a huge, huge thank you. And I will pass on to Sam, and then we'll go back.
Hi everyone, so my name's Sam, I'm 20 years old. I was a student at Leeds University last year. I just did my first year at university, but this year I'm dropping out of university in order to focus on mobilisation and actions with groups that are putting pressure on the government to force change, because we've got no time left whatsoever. And this is what I'm hopefully trying to talk about today, that the state of what we're looking at with the climate crisis and how young people can step up and do something about it. So I'm really honoured to be here.
So my name's Daisy. I've been doing activism in Leeds. I've grown up in Leeds, and I've been working in the youth climate movement for about 3 years now. I started with Youth for Climate with Shannon, and Yeah, just been working to mobilise the youth to give a voice to younger people who don't really have the chance to be heard. The climate crisis is an incredibly huge problem, and it's really disempowering as a youth to see that not enough people are really taking it seriously, and to see that it's something we don't really have a choice to fight. And so I basically work to re-empower young people and to give them a voice again.
I'm Naomi, and I'm one of the newer ones to Youth for Climate. When I joined about 2 years ago, so I'm kind of like the usual person where I've been through education and I've never really been engaged with what we discuss. So then when COVID came, and I was year 11 when COVID came, and I had the time and the energy to find the interests, and I did an environmental leadership course by a lottery funded programme actually, and that kind of propelled me into the climate movement. So since that I've become less of like your typical activist, more in the sense that I'm really interested in the well-being of young people. As someone who started climate activism when I was about 15, and I'm 18 now, and who's grown up in a space that is so unfamiliar to the general public, I'm really interested in how young people are respected and their well-being in actually taking action. So yeah.
And I think this is something that I really wanted when me and Heather and David were thinking about this space and thinking about World Mental Health Day. It was very important to actually put that conversation out there and actually earmark it, because I think in activism, none of us talks about burnout, talk about just that fight and flight mode that we're always running and chasing. But let's use this as an opportunity to educate the next generation, and even in an intergenerational way. Because, as you said, Shannon, when you talked about Youth for Climate, you talked about the growing, evolving, like gradients of it, and where you've gone from that striking to think about that intersectionality of why young people might not be involved. But can you just paint this picture of this? Every time I think about young people, I think about Don't Look Up. It's not the best film, but just think about that vision of you all are telling the world about this pending doom. But there are loads of people that might not believe you. What would you like to what is the information from each of the speakers there that you think you want the world to know around climate and the impacts of it on just your mind, just fighting for change? I know it's a big question. I don't do small questions. I don't know why I don't do that, but I should. Sorry.
Well, I think that I'd probably flip it back. And I was thinking about this in relation to just how we're set up in the room today. I actually feel incredibly uncomfortable at being sat at a table in front of people. I also am a little bit of an anxious human. And not very assertive, because I've been socialised as a woman, and so very used to not really asserting when I feel uncomfortable in a room. But I feel like I would much rather have this conversation, for example, around that table, because how I would take that question is that I think part of the problem, particularly as white activists, is in any way asserting that we know. And I feel, and I can't speak for everyone on the panel at all, but I would never in any way put across that I have enough knowledge to tell you anything. I would like to actually throw out a question in terms of how do you feel in relation to the climate, or what you see kind of around us in the heat waves, in the droughts, in how do your children feel about it? Because we have children as young as 4 years old come up to us and they're absolutely terrified. And so, yeah, I would never would never try and explain what's happening to people. I would love to ask people how they feel, and I think, we build that together. Was how I would do it.
I'd like to say how I feel about it. I think Pakistan's recent floods are a real testimony to how not looking after our environment can actually impact the livelihood, the livestock, and the life source of everybody. That was devastating, and it still is devastating. The outcome of that, the outpour of that is still happening. And I went to a floods charity appeal event where I was speaking, and the statistics that were given for how many women were giving birth in a flood, the houses ripped out, and there was one video that was being circulated, which I even talked about, and I got really emotional at my own conference talking about it with the people in our conference, because this woman was stripped of her clothes. You come from a community where women are supposed to cover themselves, and she was surrounded by men trying to help her. They weren't molesting, they were helping her, but she had no other choice. And she was giving birth in the middle of this what looked like absolutely like a hurricane, really scary. And she was just crying out for help to God. What's going on? Why am I being punished? That's all she kept saying. And all the children and all these makeshift little huts they've made for maternity wards, like for people newborn babies to be cared for. They've got no clothes, no nothing. And why has this happened? It's because of climate change. And that's a reality of what can happen. So when we watch those videos of apocalypse and things like this, it is a reality that could happen, and that frightens me. Because in this world, I've got 2 surviving children, a boy who's 10 and a girl who's 5, and I teach them daily, and do look after, don't put litter anywhere, be careful, with what you do things. And I am finding that I'm having to go out and learn more. I'll be honest, I didn't know as much when I was growing up, but I'm in my fourth decade now, so yeah, over 40s. I'm having to learn a lot more myself, to educate myself. So thank you for what you guys do, and keep doing it. You're doing amazing.
Thank you to you too.
I think following that, I think something that's become very real for me is that in climate movements like this, we talk about the climate crisis is coming, like a future thing. We don't actually take the step back and realise that it's already here. It's because we're in the global north and we think, we've got 5 years. We don't have 5 years. We didn't have 5 years 5 years ago. So I think I've got family in Pakistan who, thank God, have not been directly affected by the flood. And I just think when we get 40-degree heat in England, we have flooding and this continuation of severe extreme weather events, and we're still in a political world where we're talking about the climate crisis in the future. Something's severely wrong. So when we talk about climate anxiety, I feel like the conversation focuses on the distant future sometimes. The idea that, in 20 years, I don't want my kids to be in this environment. I don't want kids my age to have to deal with it either. So I think that's always something to highlight as well.
I was going to say something that actually contradicts a few things that have been said, but I think it's good to have some opposing opinions. I definitely agree that we have to listen to other people about what they have to say about this, but I think there's always room to show some opinion leadership, because my sense is that the public have no idea about what's coming down the line. And so I wanted to say a quote from Sir David King, who was the chief scientific advisor to the British government. And he said last year that what we do over the next 3 to 4 years will determine the future of humanity. And he said this because there are tipping points in the global climate system. And once these tipping points are passed, we're going to see cascading warming. The planet will go from a self-cooling system to a self-heating system. And when this happens, which is looking like it's going to happen, some tipping points have been passed, some are yet to be passed and are on the trajectory of being passed. When this happens, hundreds of millions of people are going to starve to death. Potentially billions of people. Now, I know that Marvina was talking about, the sort of contradiction. Sometimes events like this should be seen as being hopeful. Sometimes they should, are seen as exposing the reality of what's happening. And this is the reality of what's happening. And what I was hoping to speak about today, and I hope what we'll get onto next, is how are we actually going to do something about this? because this is the reality. This is why we're up here on this panel speaking about climate. This is what's coming down the line.
And what's great about this is that I see the conflicting conversations that we have to have. But the truth of the fact is, there are loads of people that don't understand the mental impact of this. So I know we're always in this space where we have to talk about it. We have to say, what is the full picture around climate injustice, climate and stuff. But I'm starting from this point, from you guys, on the mental health angle, just because I've seen how amazing the fight is. But people sometimes don't make the correlation between climate and mental health. And we're going to go into some of the recommendation later on, but I really just want you to paint a picture of, I don't know about you, this summer I was really scared to see how hot it was and how people thought it was cool. I don't know about you, I literally cried because of how many people had sunstroke, and to see houses burn and people, like in the UK, and the fact people were acting like it was normal. To me, that's not normal. My heart just felt heavy because in my head I'm like, I'm only 37 and I'm already tired of fighting, and I'm thinking there's more for me to fight, and that gave me anxiety. I don't know about you guys, but I want to paint that picture because people just think activists, we have this unrealistic energy. Superman. We just have this unrealistic standard that people think we need to stay with. And I think for a lot of youth strikers and young people who are coming into the space, I need to paint the picture so we can get more allies who choose to support the younger generation to do this fight. Technically, that's what this whole panel is to just give people the insight on, it's not easy, but someone's gonna do it. And you all are doing it, whether that's XR, love or hate, by the way, doing their own thing. Whether it's youth strike, love or hate, they're doing their own thing. They're not asking for no permission here. They're taking up space. They deserve to be up there. They are one of the most intersectional people, allies that I know. But that being said, back to you. I'm not going to rave about how much I love you guys, but paint a picture of how bad it is, why it affects your mental health, and what you want all of us to do to be better allies to you. And at this point, I'm passing it all to you all there, and I will not be coming back until it's time to finish the talk. Go ahead.
Could I just ask for a repeat of the question, or like a breakdown?
So,
Go on.
what burnout looks like for activists, young activists fighting the climate change? What does climate anxiety actually mean to you? And what recommendations do you want us to do to support you all in the next fight?
Would you? Yeah, Daisy.
So I think climate anxiety and anxiety in general is a giant issue in our generation. Growing up, going to school, going to work, knowing that your future is so uncertain, knowing that there's no guarantee for how your future will be, whether it'll be secure, whether we'll be able to afford anything, like the state of everything it's so bleak, it's depressing, and it's very unmotivating. And I think the big issue is that young people are getting up and they don't have much to motivate them to carry on, and it's very easy to just sit and to wallow and to give up. And I think when you reach that point, you've got like two options. You can either carry on or you can do something about it. And someone said something to me last week, and it's like really, really stuck with me. And it was about activism. And he said when things are feeling dark, and it's better to light a candle than to sit in the dark. And I think it's just taking an action, taking a step, reaching out, signing a petition, joining a group, finding a community, and that's a healing way to do it. And that's a way, I think, to tackle climate anxiety and to tackle the general bleakness in our world, is just to come together and try and fight it.
And also in like terms of burnout and like workload for activists, I don't know about everyone else, but I think it's a bit of a dilemma as an individual who wants to grow up, develop and progress. There's two sides to it. I can either dedicate my time to become a climate activist, and I can spend all my time, my energy, and I can live in that climate space, kind of a bit of a bubble compared to the rest of the public. Or I can choose the typical route and I can go get a career and a job. But I think for young people, activists in this space, there's an expectation when we see youth strikers, when we see people 18 and below in XR taking part, you don't realise that they live two lives. They live a life at school and then they go home at 4 p.m. and they work again, voluntary unpaid work for our future, which should never have been done by us. And I think there's an immense amount of pressure for 18-year-olds in the climate movement who have a transition period between compulsory education and then real life. It's pressure on what they're going to do. Are they going to continue to focus and dedicate their energy to the climate movement, or do they just have to become another person just working to survive? And I think the cost of living crisis is just another example of this as well.
I mean, I could say the same thing about, having deep-rooted pit in my stomach about what's coming down the line. I'll say something controversial to spice things up a little bit. I sort of despise the way that climate anxiety is talked about in the media, that, as a sort of condition, like young people that are deep-rooted fear about what's coming down the line, have some irrational phobia. You don't talk about, let's say, people in Ethiopia are on the brink of starvation because famine caused by climate collapse. You wouldn't say that they have hunger anxiety, would you? Or if there's young people caught up in knife crime because because for various, structural reasons, you wouldn't say that they have blade anxiety, would you? You'd say that they have a deep-rooted, you'd say they're living in fear, right? Existential fear. And to say that young people who are scared about the climate have climate anxiety, I think, diminishes the whole problem. And I think it's a product of a phenomena of what I would call the liberal class not being able to accept that this civilization is going to collapse on our current trajectory. And the sort of middle class, elite educated, global north, saying that young people who are scared about the climate have climate anxiety. When we're talking about the collapse of our civilizations, to say that someone hasn't, of course, we all have, a deep-rooted anxiety about the climate, but the way that it's talked about, I think, is a product of the fact that we're not willing to look and face that we're all screwed on the current trajectory.
Could I add a little bit of hope? Because I swear that we are actually really happy.
You know what? I'm going to stand up for this one. Let me just... As much as it might sound like other people are having this conversation around climate anxiety, let's make this clear. It's not being had. Not in the places where the policies are being made. Not in the places where resources need to be given. Not in the places where we need to understand that, coupled with the intersectionality of the problems that we're facing. I would love to think it's a liberal word, and I would love to say, every place is having this conversation. But I can also challenge that and say that's actually me being controversial, just like you. It's a privileged place to sit, because I can tell you black and brown bodies don't know that they're feeling anxiety about the environment. You just don't know whether tomorrow is guaranteed. We can't turn up into protest when we know that our white counterparts can go and strike, but we might actually get in trouble for actually fighting for our own environment. We also know that the environmental space is so white. Let's call it what it is. So that means that even when things are spoken about, we are always excluded from the context of it. In fact, it's an emergency in the global south. But yet, when it's spoken about, it's romanticized in a way that doom and gloom, when we already live in doom and gloom on stuff we did not create. So putting climate anxiety on the table is a way to build allyship, actually, for me. Because it's a way for us to step back 1 second and say, who is missing out in this conversation? Why is environmentalism so white when, and it is what I mean. I did not stutter in the process of saying it. We need to decolonize our environmental space to the point that we're able to say exactly how it impacts different communities. Yes, I know some people will be like, but it's still all still doom and gloom. Yes, it is, but who's been left out in the conversation, and what's our parts that we need to play in changing that? So please indulge me in a little bit while we look at this conversation, because climate anxiety might be something normal in white spaces, but because we're in Black History Month, it's World Mental Health Day, and it's hate crime awareness, while we're trying not to get shot and killed and stopped and searched and sectioned, we might not be knowing that much about the environment. We just feel it, because the environment has always been toxic to us. So that being said, I'm going to set the question again, but I'm going to put it to the public, and please feel free to ask them any question. That I would love that this is actually something where it gets emotional talking about this stuff, because it's like knowing information that you wish everybody would know, but they just don't know. Sorry, I'm really getting...
You know what, Marvina? I was just going to add to what you said, give you a couple of seconds.
Thank you.
Do you know when you come from a deprivated background, when you don't come from a privileged background, when you can't afford to put food on your table for your children, and you decide whether it's going to be the bills that you're paying or food for your children? When you come and migrate from a country which has led millions of people to commit suicide because of the inflation, and I'm talking about Kashmir, I'm from Kashmir, by the way, so it's still fought over. It's still not an independent state. So depending on what part of Kashmir you live in, there's always some sort of issues going on, war conflict going on. You know, and I hear stories every day on our news about how families are committing suicide. Men are committing suicide, and women, poisoning their own children because they know they can't provide for them anymore, because the cost of living has gone up so much. And this is before it hit the UK. We're talking about the third world countries, and Pakistan's not a third world country, and this was happening years ago. So, again, what Marvina just said, how can you think about the environment and all those things and take that information in and see what's happening if actual survival is the most primary, focus, if that makes sense?
And I think that's the important space that we're here today. I'm not expecting just these young people on this table to come up with a solution. That's not it. But what we wanted to do is just paint that picture of mental health in an unequal world. That's the theme, right? It's unequal. And yes, we want kindness, but kindness involves us baby stepping other people into the space. And as allies, what I'm hoping to hear with the general conversation is, I'm going to give a practical example of what Youth Strike's done. They realized that Friday might be a messed up day for everybody to take strikes because people are praying. Am I correct? And can you just explore what you guys did as an ally with, to make a space and timing so it's not like middle of the day when we know it's prayers time, and you've done it like after. I've just said it though. I don't know why I just done that. But for me, I don't know, to other people, this might sound like me being excited about these young people, because then I've seen grown-ups that can't do it, like where they change a whole program of activity like that, because they want their Muslim brothers and sisters to know that they're welcome in the space. But even the anxiety, as you say, on the way, it would just be great to hear from you guys, and it's a lot of pressure, because being an ally, you get it wrong sometimes, so what's the pressure of trying to get it right, and some examples of what you guys have done with decolonizing the environmental space, and because we're moving it into climate justice conversation too, as you can notice what I've done there, because time. And please, some people, if you want to eat, get some food, do get some and come back in, because we're just trying to catch up time in the process. But you've got a question, then I'll come to you guys. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing as well. So I've got 3 older kids, 22, 20 and 18, and a little one. And my older children have all wanted to get involved with this movement, and they would come to the protest. They did take a day off school, and I'm glad you guys realised, because they did get told off, and the teachers were particularly harsh with them. They went to an outstanding school, inverted commas, but because of the colour of their skin, whatever it is, they were told off more than their white counterparts who would be going every week. But one thing they did notice is they did feel marginalised. But what I would like to say to you, what Marvina has said as well, I think the narrative around climate change has also got to include that it's the global south that have been impacted by climate change for decades. I mean, when I was young, I remember Band-Aid, and I'm sure quite a few here will remember Band-Aid, the original one, the better one. And seeing these children in, African countries starving, well, we all know why that was occurring. That was because of climate change. But it was just all these poor Africans. It kind of ended up entering, being a part of the narrative of othering these poor, deprived, underdeveloped countries. They're not underdeveloped. The global south is not the third world. That is the result of colonialism and capitalism. They have taken their resources, and where we live in such comfort, we are the cause of that. So it's our responsibility in this country, and I'm a part of that as well, despite being, my heritage is different, my ethnic heritage is different. But I think changing that narrative is really important, and I appreciated you mentioning the floods in Pakistan, because they haven't been getting enough coverage at all. And again, people just see them as the other. They see brown skin, but had that been a country that was white, and we see this in war as well. Quite rightly so, people have been supporting the people in Ukraine, as they should, but you don't get the same level of support in Syria, in Yemen. And it's all interlinked. It's all, we're talking a lot about intersectionality today. It is so interlinked, all of this, that I can see the frustration on your face, Sam, and I commend you for being so brave for dropping out of uni to do that. But I know for a fact with my kids, and this is again, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but my kids would never think of doing that, because they're already having to work 10 times harder to get to where other kids will easily get to. Do you understand the kind of struggles that they will have to face because of the colour of their skins, the names that they have, and my daughter wearing a headscarf? There's just so many barriers for them. So I suppose what I'm saying is that coming from my background, it's a bit harder for them. Does that make sense? I'm not sure. Yeah, I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I didn't catch your name. Simon. Lovely to meet you, Simon. Thank you. I just wanted to respond a little bit to what you were saying, and maybe touch on one of the questions Marvina threw out in terms of what we're trying to do to open up our space. Because I think the recognition that we're here to learn. We're here to learn from our black and brown communities who have been leading this fight, as you say, right? Because, and as Marvina said, on the front line. And whether that's talking about air pollution in inner city London, or all of the toxic waste facilities, which are majority placed in areas where there's more black and brown people than white people. So whether it's here in our country, whether it's abroad, I think one of the really interesting things, kind of the mention of colonisation today and the narrative, and that continues within our movement now. One of the things we had to challenge within the conversation around Leeds Bradford Airport, there was a campaign actually led by Black Lives Matter in 2016 that called for the shutting down and the stopping of expansion of airports. In our own country, Black Lives Matter UK led a campaign on Twitter. And they explicitly linked that to the deportation complex, because these flights and the expansion of the airport system, of the airport industry, those flights are also, they're the ones that are deporting people back to Rwanda, back, the Afro-Caribbean community who were given status here and then have it taken away. And so, but when we started talking about the airport in our own city, there was no conversation that Black Lives Matter had done that campaign a few years earlier. And there was no tying of the conversation around airports to racism and the structural interconnectedness of it all. And that's where I think we as white allies have to learn, because we don't face these systems. So the only way we're ever going to know the interconnectedness is to sit and listen. And also, when we do hear it, to bloody do something about it. Because if the one thing that we have is that we get put on platforms like this, it's our responsibility to highlight. And so thank you so much to your children for coming to our actions. And if they want to, I would love to have more of a conversation with them about how do we make that space something that they want to participate in, that they want to lead, and something which is safe and, restorative, right? We want to have those conversations.
In the lectures, in the labs, everything. I think when you're dealing with so much, as I said before, it becomes so exhausting. And then at the back of your mind, you're also, there's the environment. There's my future, the future of, the future generations. We've brought up our children to understand that you leave the world in a better place than what you find it. You don't it's not there for your consumption to use and abuse. And, as a Muslim, God talks about that in the Quran, that this has been created for you to look after, and you are meant to leave it in a better place. So we know that. But when you're trying to survive on a day-to-day and get through, being dehumanized and having to prove your humanity on a daily basis, unfortunately the environment does become a secondary thing, which is sad, really sad. But I think if decoloniality was talked about a bit more in that space, I think I think kids will understand how they're connected, and that this is a part of my fight too. Does that make sense? Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Let's bring it back to the conversation. I really, really feel really anxious when I talk about environment. I think today is the first day I feel I can talk and be like this openly, because normally they're happy-go-lucky, hyping everybody up, getting everybody to do what they need to do. But today feels like a safe space for me to say I really don't know what I don't know, and I'm trying to figure it out. And if I feel this way, I can only imagine. So I'm gonna come to Sam and just say what's your clear vision in your mind? What coming from Extinction Rebellion, come with taking that rebellious action as young people and standing in that space and just saying, no swear. Okay, I'm trying to tell my mouth not to swear, so sorry. I'm done with being nice, and I need you all to fix up. This is your time to just tell us, how do we, in our own little way, start fixing up the mess right now? Through an Extinction Rebellion kind of hat.
No, it's a good question. I wanted to talk about what we actually have to do, in my opinion. So, again, this is going to be controversial. We're in the civic hall, entwined with the council, which is through the council you make change through reform, right? Through the council and in this space, we're talking about reformist progress. We're talking about incremental change through the system, through our existing political structures. And the fact of the matter is, I would argue, empirically speaking, sociologically speaking, it's not going to be possible to make the change we need at the speed and scale required through our existing system. It's not happening. And the reason it's not happening is because Sir David King says we've got 3 to 4 years to determine the future of humanity. People in the global south are already dying in their millions. And if we pass tipping points, it's billions of people. And these tipping points are going to be passed in the next 3 to 4 years. So we don't have time for reformist progress, especially when you look at the Conservative government we've got and the opposition. Now, in order to make change, people are going to have to get hurt. When you look at civil resistance episodes throughout history, how do you make social change at a rapid speed and scale? You look at the civil rights movement, you look at the suffragettes movement, you look at other non-violent revolutionary movements. people are going to have to put themselves on their line and people are going to get hurt. And coming to this point, I completely agree, there's all sorts of structural barriers to entry. We're not coming at this on an equal playing field. We're in an absolutely awful situation. We've got, the domestic racism we've been talking about today. We've got an international climate crisis in which we've got a handful of years to tackle. And the empirical reality is, in order to make progress on it, people are going to have to get out on the streets, they're going to have to be arrested, people are going to have to be put into prison, and we're going to have cause massive disruption. Again, this is not an equal playing field, right? Not everyone has an equal access to do this, but this is the empirical reality. How do you make rapid social change non-violently at the speed and scale required? We have a good idea because it's been done time and time again throughout history, because the suffragettes did it and the civil rights movement did it. Otpor did it in Serbia. It's been done time and time again. So what it's going to require is we step up, we get out on the streets together and we cause mass disruption. And yeah, I mean, we've got limited time, so I'll leave it there, but there's things going on in Leeds, it's happening now. If you want to come and talk to me at the end about how you could get involved, then I'll hang around.
So sorry, I'm just going to pick on something you just said, I met you during one of my mass disruptions, and when in Leeds, we don't even do mass disruptions like the way I do in London. I mean, like London Bridge totally blocked. Yes, I am that person. If you were trying to get through, you didn't. But I was one of the only people of colour in that space. And the only reason I could do that mass disruption is because I had allies. We had something called a body system. Because the way the police treated, I saw the way they treated other people in XR, who said, I'm peaceful, what about you? All those nice, lovely, jubbly stuff. I saw how nice they were as soon as they came towards me, and that's why you said you had to chase and run after me, because at that point, the intel was, they were hounding me from the time I got there to the time I left. So it's dangerous to be even black and an environmentalist in this space. So what are the things that are being put in place for people like us who want to get involved, but we know that we would get police totally different?
I mean, yeah, as I said, it's an awful situation, right? We've got this brutal domestic racism from the Met Police Force and other police forces across the country. And what the social science, I would argue, is telling us is we have to get out and interact with them if we're going to make change. Like has been done through, we have to make change throughout the conventional, outside of the conventional political system. This means we're entering into civil resistance. And we have to have conversations. We have to talk about in our movements the fact that there are structural barriers to some people getting involved, as in ethnic minorities are likely to face brutal systemic, are likely to face worse violence by the police than white people. And we have to have acknowledgement of this. We have to understand that this is happening. But I'm going to argue that and there are lots of other ways you can support resistance projects, but we have to do it. It's not like we cannot do it because we've got 3 to 4 years. So we have to have acknowledgement, we have to have understanding that other people can get involved in different ways.
I was watching a video on Twitter last night about Just Stop Oil, which is a controversial group in itself. But primarily the people there will want change for the climate. But I watched the public's response of physical and verbal abuse. And I say to people in the room and to people interested in helping, on a personal level, don't roadblock, but I do support it. But for individuals, I think an understanding of why people choose to do this is a key thing. So if you're ever in central London, for example, and you walk down the street and the road's been blocked and you're seeing people being violent to people taking part, I think it's just having an understanding, and that thing earlier about being an upstander, not a bystander, and actually saying what they're doing is trying to contribute to a worldwide movement for change. We're not here to disrupt individual people. We're not here to upset you. We're just here to cause this tipping point. And as Sam says, a tipping point, I mean, like, socially, not like climate-wise, obviously. Sam says about how he wants like a national change for individuals. You want you want everyone to kind of flip and support you. You want the public support. And I think that starts by people understanding where we come from, understanding why we do it. So when you walk down the street and you see disruption, you just think, I can see why they're doing this. I personally don't want to, but you need to understand why we are, which I think people fail to do. They fail to look at the reasoning of what we're actually doing. They fail to look at the science. And I do think that is a big issue, because in the climate movement there's a spectrum of people. Some want to disrupt and break the law, and then some probably want revolution but work more towards reform. And I just think, back to like the well-being, it is hard as an individual, and for individuals taking part, it's hard to gauge how much you want to commit to this. So I just thought I'd highlight that.
Is there time for one more question? If I could, ask something. Sorry. This might sound like a bit more of a casual question, an everyday question, if you will, but occasionally I'll be sharing things on like my social media and like different environmental things, because I work in comms, and like a big part of what I do is just having those conversations and just sharing those resources so that people see it on the everyday. And they might get really sick of my social media, but I'm like, well, it's happening every day, all the time. And, on a personal level, and I am privileged to say this, but I am vegan, and I do it for environmental reasons because I'm terrified, like a lot of us are. And because of that, I'll be having meals with people, and then inevitably they always ask about, why are you vegan and why are you doing this? And every time I go blank, and I'm like, where do I start? How do I go from, we're having a lovely time, to here's a really deep and dark and just conversations that people don't want to hear? How do you have that resilience, or where do you even... I'm just curious what you do on a personal level to be almost unpopular in that moment, and to be like, here's a resource. Or do you do that where it's like, I'm going to use the opportunity to have a deeper conversation? Or do you kind of go, look, there's too much for me to say right now, but here is something for you to look into it yourself, because at the end of the day, the responsibility is on them as well, and not to just asking out of curiosity when they don't really want to hear the answers, sort of thing.
Sorry, can I just come? I don't know whether you're in my brain. As a black person doing Black Lives Matter, you go out and you try and have fun, right? And it seems as the night goes on and everyone's drinking, it comes into, so like, why do you do what you do? and in your head, you're trying to like just chill on that day. And I'm just painting a picture of me. This is me being selfish. Just letting people know that if you see me outside, allow me, yeah? Because I don't get to go outside and do grown-up stuff. So don't ask me about race when you see me with a pint. I might just need to just have a pint, you know what I mean? I can't save the world all the time, and I think also with young people, it's not like with any activist, we can't be talking about the cause all the time. And if people are allies, they can go and do some learning themselves. Google it. Find a way, read. Allyship involves them doing the work. And sometimes people want to just have dumb questions. They already have their mind made up. I remember someone literally disrupting my fun 2 days ago, just to be like, yeah, but have you not seen that Candace Owens or whatever around black? I go, so if you knew you were going to bring that conversation up, why ask me about why not just say all lives matter? I feel triggered by it. Well, I'll pass it to you guys now. How do you get the courage and the resilience to speak to dumb people?
The truth is, I don't always, and it's difficult. But yeah, everyone always asks. Everyone always brings it up. You see people littering. You see people doing silly things and saying annoying things, and you have to remember to be an upstander. And you have to remember, but it's difficult when you're in social situations to do that, especially when you're not like super confident. But the more you do it, the easier it gets. And I think sometimes it depends as well, because being a young person and doing it is very different. It's very, very easy to be patronised. I've kind of given up on a whole half of my family even talking about it, because whenever it's brought up, they end up completely dismissing everything I come up with, and you almost have to let it be, because otherwise you'll just go in circles, and you have to take time off, and you have to build resilience in places where it matters and places where you can actually make a difference. And I mean, that might not be the best way to go about it, but that's just my personal experience.
I've only made like small changes and nothing like what you guys have done, and I would like to do more, but it's definitely fear that's like held me back, and like how and like what are those steps. And I think part of that is like not being surrounded by the right kinds of people, which sounds horrible, but I think when you've got that support of other like-minded people, it helps. And like the amount of times where if someone is having that conversation with me, I'll be, because I'm a recovering people pleaser, I'll just be like, oh, you know, and I'll just say something that comes into my head. And the amount of times people go, oh, you're a fun vegan, aren't you? And I'm just like, and I have to hold back the like frustration of like, yeah, but there's real reasons why we do this and why people do a lot more. Sorry, you can carry on.
No, absolutely. Like speaking to the people pleaser in me as well, like, and also like so like kind of, you know, there are layers to it. Okay, so growing up, like a class dynamic, right? I grew up in a town, Todmorden, not far from here. Didn't have a lot. So one of the legacies of that is that I completely invalidate everything that I think and feel, because I was told by society that my voice, like, unless I go out and get it and find it in a book or some stat to back what I think and feel, then it doesn't matter. So one of the ways, like, for example, having that conversation around veganism, one of the, you know, finding people who can validate what I think and feel. Like, I live in Chapeltown, right? There's a lot of Rastas who are vegan, and they, like, having conversation with them and, like, being able to draw on the experiences of others and be like, oh, actually, like, I think and feel this, and someone else does too, and kind of we can build that together. And I think the other thing that just really, really came to mind that's been feeling so important in the past few days is, and Marvina was saying it, you know, it's building joy. Like, how the hell do we build joy into the everyday that we, like, we're always pushing for something and some sort of change. If we never build joy into it, we're never going to be able to keep going. And I've been really inspired by a lot of writers, particularly within the Black community. So big shout out to Adrienne Marie Brown, who's a queer Black writer. Also to Ross Davis, who just brought out the book on delight. Like, these powerful, positive concepts of, because at the heart of the climate crisis is structural systems telling us that as human beings and as bodies, we don't matter. So one of the biggest kind of, you know, ways that we can not only sustain ourselves mentally, but maybe also actually take on this, is to tell ourselves that we do matter and we're totally deserving of pleasure and joy, and we should be able to build that into activism. And like, I feel that working with Daisy and Naomi, like, Daisy is an insane baker, phenomenal, right? And like, our meetings are absolutely lush, and like, we make sure that we take care of each other. And it's because, you know, as Daisy was saying, you don't always have the energy to do that alone. And every time we do that, we're telling ourselves, you know, internally, but also each other, that we are worthy, and the world that we want to build relies on the fact that we tell each other that we're worthy. And we're coming from different places, and we have to stand in allyship to make sure that our voice is used to say that not just me, everyone in this room is worthy. So I think cultivating joy as well.
I am grateful. I don't know if any other person wanted to ask a question or... Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'm taking my shoes off.
It's mine to be the last question.
Last question. You can have a short break.
It's not a question as such, it's more of a kind of furthering about this questioning that people do. I mean, I gave up meat in my 20s, so as you know, people just used to question all the time, and why do you do this and why do you do that? And I think it is in order to preserve your energy and your joy, and to have some downtime, you just have to decide, are they doing it because they're genuinely interested in you, or are they doing it because they're just wanting to be controversial and start some sort of argument, really. Because people do say unkind things all the time, and it's about not engaging. You know, when people sort of say to me, well, people always say to me, why am I involved in hate crime when they think I'm some sort of white, privileged person. I am white, I'm privileged because I'm white, but I was brought up on a council estate where girls weren't supposed to stay on at school and was constantly being told when I was doing my A-levels that I was a waste of public money. So life isn't as simple as people think. But so I think, I've lost my track now. Sorry, going on to the council estate. But I just think there are people who, so they say, why am I doing this? Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Yeah, why am I supporting black people and gay people and disabled people? And I just say, why wouldn't I? You know, and I think sometimes you don't have to justify. We do it because it's the right thing to do. And some people are just trying to say, you haven't got a part to play in this. Well, we all talk about allies all day, haven't we? So, I become more London as the day goes on as well. So I think it's just differentiating between people who are genuinely interested and you might have some influence on their thinking, or people who are just trying to wind you up. And I haven't got the energy for those sorts of people 24 hours a day. So I think it's just being really careful about what you get engaged with, really. Otherwise you wouldn't survive, would you? And I just want to go to a party sometimes. You know, when I worked in asylum support, I think if I say what I do, I'm going to get into it. You know, I've had to get into a big debate. But then I actually thought, well, actually, if I was seeking asylum, I couldn't hide away from it, so I'm not going to hide. But people some people just out to cause trouble. Don't know if that adds anything. Hope so.
It does. I'm not going to lie. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's not easy being heroes, and no one wants to make themselves into... People that go into activism, we're not doing it for anything other than inequality, don't like it, gonna do something about it. That's it. There's no chemical to it, that's what we do. But we're still human. And when it comes to the environment, I want to say a massive thank you, because with all the funding and resources that is in Leeds right this moment, I want this to go on record. All that funding and resources would not be in Leeds without the young people from Youth for Climate doing the work, going on the streets, getting 12,000 people to march. It would not be the same conversation. And to talk about inequalities, I can also highlight this same young people are still doing this and not getting paid anything to do this work. So yes, people creating pathways, but the acknowledgement needs to go on history that without you guys doing the work you do and still doing it, sometimes thanklessly, we love and appreciate you, and we're gonna fight and be the best allies. Keep teaching us how to be, in fact, we will check our privilege and learn how to be better allies to Youth for Climate, XR students, and making sure we can do better for you. Is there any last things you want to say before we close this session? Cool? You go, Mike.
The only thing that I would say was just, I know sometimes it can be hard to translate, like, what does allyship look like? If you are really wanting to stand by and believe in the importance of young people speaking out, there are very tangible things coming away from today. If you have any sort of skills or you're good at anything, please come and speak to us. Or that you just enjoy doing something. We are always looking for support, and we're also in the process of setting up things like a youth archive in the city. So if you even if you don't know what you want to do, please come and say hello to Naomi, Daisy, myself, or Sam. Sometimes we don't actually know what allyship looks like, but we can work that out together. And would love in any way to keep the conversation up with any of you people in the room. So thank you very much for today. That would be the only thing I would say.
And how do they follow you on social media?
Youth for Climate Leeds on Instagram, and I think it's the same for Facebook.
Yeah, but if you search on Twitter, it's Y Leeds UK. But if you want to come up, I can give you our email as well.
Okay. Sam, how do they find and follow your campaign?
Hopefully you'll see Just Stop Oil in the news over the next few days. You can Student Rebellion Leeds on Instagram, and Just Stop Oil is the biggest national campaign now for climate. So you can check those guys out too.
Thank you so much. Can we give them a round of applause?